Okay, so hello everyone. Good afternoon. Assalamu alaikum. I hope you're all doing great. Thank you so much for joining us today. I hope you're enjoying your weekend in Libya. So today's session is going to be about how to choose your major and minor. And we're very happy to have with us a representative from University of Denver. So he prepared a great presentation for you, and he'll walk you through, how to decide when you are applying to US universities and when, of course, select a major or a minor. And he also give you more details about the American educational system. So make sure to prepare your questions. And of course, we will answer all of them at the end of the presentation. But before we move on to the content of today's session, I would like to start with a brief introduction about the network of Education USA, because we always have new followers. So who are we and how can we help you? So as you can see in this slide, Education USA is a US Department of State network, which means that we are your official source if you are interested in pursuing your undergraduate or graduate studies in the United States. We offer free, unbiased, accurate, and impartial information about all accredited institutions in the US, and we are located in different countries. So we are in more than 170 countries and territories. We help you with different things. So number one, we offer free public info sessions. They could be about the 5 steps to study in the United States. They could be about different opportunities, available for international students. And we also do some chat sessions with university representatives, just like today's session, in which you can learn more details about, their programs or scholarship opportunities, or like in today's topic, you will learn more about how to, declare a major and minor and when to do that. And also we do some individual consultations. So if you want to connect with me and if you want to share all of your questions with me, make sure to send me a message by WhatsApp or just send me an email in the slide. So we are very active on social media. All what you have to do is just to type Education USA Libya, and you will find us on Instagram, on Facebook, on Twitter, and even on YouTube. So always keep an eye on our social media pages, because we always have a lot of great virtual events for all of you. And last but not least, this is the official website of our network, educationusa.state.gov. Make sure to go to this website if you want to explore the 5 steps to study in the US, or to find your advising center if you are following us from a different country today, and even to check the financial aid opportunities that are available for international students. Again, welcome everyone. Now it's time to start the presentation, and make sure to type any questions you have if you want here in the Zoom or in the Facebook page, and we will answer all of them.
Thank you so much, Amira. I hope everyone can hear me. My name is Jacob Wood, and I'm the Director of Undergraduate International Admission here at the University of Denver, which is in Denver, Colorado. If you're not familiar with Colorado and Denver, we are right in the middle of the United States. Denver is the 17th largest city in the United States. And so it's actually a very bustling place and really cool place to live, partly because we're a big city. We're located right beside the mountains. So it's a really great location for people who enjoy outdoors, but also want to get that city living experience. You may be wondering though, like why I am here. And as you probably have seen, we're going to be today talking about how to choose a major or a minor or a certificate or a concentration. I'll get into what those all mean. Basically, what I'm here today to do is talk to you about how you choose the thing to study in, to specialize in at university. I'm mostly focusing this on how to choose your focus of study as an undergraduate student. That's primarily the students that I work with. But some of the concepts that I'm talking about today also apply if you're looking to consider graduate school or a PhD program. The terminology may be a little different, and you may have slightly different things that you have to do in sort of choosing your focus as a master's or PhD student, but a lot of the concepts do carry over. So just keep that in mind as I speak. First things first, I want to talk about something that's a little interesting about universities in the United States is that they're usually quite comprehensive. Not all of them, some of them are very specialized, but a school like the University of Denver, we are a comprehensive research institution. So that means that we have more than 100 different undergraduate majors for people to look at or to study. We have lots of different master's and PhD programs. You name it, we probably offer it. in some fashion here at the University of Denver. And that's one of the things that makes studying in the United States so interesting, is that you can come to a school and you can mix and match and choose lots of different things to focus on while you're here. If you are interested in studying something like business, you won't just study business. You might choose to study business and some other stuff. Or if you're choosing psychology, you'll study psychology and some other things. And that makes studying in the US very interesting and gives you a lot of flexibility. My plan for today, though, is to go over some terms and definitions, talk about the point of our session, how to choose a major or a focus of study, then also to leave plenty of time for questions and answers. And I mean that both answering questions about how to choose a major, but I'm also happy to spend some time answering any questions you have about studying in the United States, period. And so I'm just happy to be here as a resource for you in what is early morning here in Denver, but I know it's afternoon in Libya and elsewhere as well. So first, let's go over some terminology. What does that mean? To start, a major for undergraduate or bachelor students in the US is the primary thing that you are studying. It is going to be the subject that you take the most classes in, but it's not going to be the subject that you take all of your classes in. So as I mentioned, universities in the US, when you're an undergraduate, you're taking a lot of different subjects of study. And that's partly so that you are a good critical thinker. It's also because sometimes you need to have those foundational concepts from other areas in order to learn more advanced subjects in the primary area of your study. So again, a major is the primary thing that you're going to choose, but will not be the only thing that you study. When a university talks about a minor is the secondary focus. It is the thing that you may take a lot of classes in, but not the thing that you're going to be taking the most classes in. Sometimes those minors are very closely tied to your major. Sometimes there's something totally different. And also some universities, for some majors, actually require you to have a minor. So you're going to be required to choose both a primary focus and a secondary focus. Another term that you're going to see at many universities is called a concentration. And this term actually is less standardized from school to school. At some places, a concentration is actually a focus within your major or primary thing you choose. My master's degree is in public affairs, and in my public affairs master's degree, I got to choose concentrations within that. So I focused on policy analysis or contemporary European studies. Those are concentrations, focuses within my primary area. But at other places, a concentration may be something closer to a minor or a series of classes that you take, something more like a certificate, which is a certificate is like a minor, but often with less courses and maybe very specific. So at some schools, you might be able to get a certificate in Microsoft Office applications, or you might get a certificate in sustainability or a certificate in cybersecurity. These are all possible things you can get a certificate in that tend to try to say that you are trained in a specific subject. So it's kind of like a minor, but a little bit differently structured. And finally, the thing that I wanted to make sure that everyone knew this term before we go on is a general education or core class. So general education is a set of classes that all students take regardless of their major. And at some schools, that actually can be a very significant part of the classes that you take during your degree. We also want to make sure that we have covered what undecided and undeclared means. So that is actually an option for many undergraduate students, where if you haven't set your major focus, you can actually apply undecided or undeclared and spend your first year or two actually taking classes in many different subjects before choosing which major you want to continue the next couple of years in, 3 and 4, what major you actually want to be, so that you can start off exploring and then move into it after that. That's a little different than other countries. So if you're familiar with education systems in other popular international education destinations like the UK, where this is much less common in that sort of environment. But in the US, this is actually very popular. And in fact, is one of our most popular undergraduate majors here at the University of Denver for our first year students. They come in without knowing what they want to study. and then spend that first year exploring many different subjects, and then choosing which one to focus on after that. So I've mentioned now major classes, I've talked about general education classes, minors, and electives are another type of class where basically you just get to take whatever one class sounds interesting to you. This is generally what a degree looks like at the undergraduate level in the US, where most of your classes are going to be major classes, but you'll see that there's a lot of room in the degree for classes in general education, your minor, and electives. Your electives could be something actually really interesting. And sometimes someone will take a elective class and then decide that it is so interesting they want to take more and end up turning it into a minor. For example, if you come in as an art major, so you want to be an artist, you might take a class in business because you know that you need to understand some of the business side of the art world, and find that you like business so much, you decide to turn it into a business minor to take more classes in business. So it's going to become your secondary focus. Some students choose to take multiple minors, so they may have less room in their electives, for less room to take electives. But generally speaking, this is what a degree in the US kind of looks like. But now, let's talk about where do you start when you're trying to choose a major. And I always tell people that I think you first have to decide what matters to you when you're choosing a major. And this is really meaning starting with some introspection, talking to yourself, evaluating your priorities in life. You can talk to other experts in the field, parents, counselors, Education USA advisors, teachers, but first you have to really start by deciding what matters to you. And a good way to start framing that is with this Japanese concept called Ikigai, which is a name for figuring out like what is your life's worth, something that gives you purpose, and helps you feel like your life really matters and is contributing. So Ikigai is the intersection of finding what you love, so starting with what you are passionate about, what the world needs, what you are good at, and what you can be paid for. And if you can find a vocation find something in life that meets all of those things, then you're going to be more happy, you're going to have more success, you're going to end up being better throughout the course of your life than if you found something that you can be paid for and you're good at, but you're not particularly in love with it and the world doesn't particularly need it. That would be a profession. If you can find something that the world needs and you can be paid for, but you don't love it or you're not exceptionally good at it, then it's not going to give you the same kind of sense of purpose that something that meets all of these criteria will. And so that is why I like to start with this discussion, framing it this way, trying to figure out what you can find that meets all of these four categories. But what does that mean in practice? So when you're trying to decide what you love, I encourage you to start by making a list of what inspires you. Make a list of how you enjoy spending your free time. Make a list of the things that you really want to do in your future career. And starting there, that may mean that you write out that you really love children or you really love inspiring others. It may mean that you love problem solving. It may mean that you love music, maybe that you love art. These are all perfectly valid examples of things that you might love that you might jot down on a list as you start kind of figuring out what you love to help you guide what major you should choose. You also then maybe want to know, how do I know what I'm good at? You can make a list of the subjects you do well in school, so things like math, English, sciences, but know that school is not the only place to start by looking at what you're good at. You have skills that are both things that you are measured on in school as an academic discipline, but also skills that are outside of that. If you're really good at talking to others, if you're really good at counseling, that is a skill that you could jot down. If you're really good at managing complex things, or you're really good at being a leader, those are skills that you might not have been graded on in school, but would totally be valid for you to write down as you're trying to figure out what would be a good major for you. You may also want to know, how do I look at what the world needs. And I think that this is sometimes a little more complicated for students because they start to think huge. They think, well, the world needs global warming to be solved. The world needs people who work in, or world needs to have international peace. But it's also helpful to just think local and think small. Think of the problems that you see in your community and how the problems in your community that probably need to be solved. That might mean better infrastructure for water or for roads. That might mean better infrastructure for education. That might mean other issues that you're seeing affect your local community. And that's something that you could start by thinking about what the world needs. Think local and think small. The final thing, this is often the first thing that people think of when they're trying to decide a major, but I put it last for a reason, because I think all of the first three things I said are as important as this question. So you do need to think about what you can be paid for, because if you're going to be studying and going to be getting an advanced degree, you know that you want to find a good career after you graduate. But what you can be paid for is probably a much longer list than you understand. There are many unique jobs that you wouldn't necessarily think of when you're just thinking of jobs in the world. You could be a zookeeper and study animal behavior as an undergraduate student. You could be a game designer and have studied game design as an undergraduate. Or you could study many different things and become the director of international admission like me, or become an Education USA advisor. There's all sorts of unique jobs out there where you can apply the different skills that you have and the things you've learned during your undergraduate. So don't just think doctor, lawyer, engineer, which is most often what students start with. It's helpful to realize that the list of jobs is very long. And so if you have a passion and interest in something that may not seem at first like you can turn into a meaningful job, know that there are jobs out there. You just need to look through the career services offices at the university. You need to look at a number of other resources to kind of see what the earning potential is for some of these things once you kind of zero in on subjects of study that may be more off the beaten path, more out of the norm. So then, if you've done all of this and you've started like kind of zeroing in on what would really give your life purpose, if you were to choose a major in it, you may be wondering, what are your options? And a good way for you to figure that out is by starting to explore. Select any university that you're interested in. I would encourage you to start with the University of Denver, but you could start with any university. And you can look through their website to see the list of majors that are offered at that school. Most schools are going to have links and details on their major list so that you can explore classes, career outcomes. You can see what the faculty members are researching and what classes they teach. And I'm going to actually go ahead and just put right in the chat here for our friends on Zoom a link to the undergraduate programs, for example, here at DU. And again, every university, any university you're interested in, probably has a list of programs like this. And it's a great way for you to just kind of start to see what your majors are, because I think you're going to start noticing that there's going to be a lot of majors that you've never heard of. So once you start looking at them, you then start learning more about them and see if maybe that's a good fit for you. But first and foremost, you have to start by looking at the list of things that are offered. And that's a good way to start, is by looking at the major list at a university. Some majors you're going to see do match a specific job title. So for example, if you major in accounting, you probably want to be an accountant, and that's what many people who major in accounting become. But many don't. So all majors, regardless of if they match a job title, can lead to different meaningful jobs. So if you major in animal behavior as an undergraduate, you're probably not going to be an animal behaviorist as your job if you go out into the workforce. But you might become a zookeeper, you might become a veterinarian assistant, you might become all these other things that use that information but don't have the same title. That may sound very basic, but I notice all the time that we have students who are afraid to major in something like epidemiology because it doesn't sound like the jobs that they know. Also know that if a school doesn't offer an exact major that you know, it may offer something similar but with a different name. So be very open when you're starting to explore majors to look at related but slightly different major names and see why they are titled that. So you might find that some schools offer a criminology degree while other ones offer a criminal justice degree if you're interested in crime. And exploring the differences between those two majors can be really enlightening to both help you choose what to study, but also then help you choose what your career path should be, since the two are connected very closely. We also want to encourage you to think differently and to think specific. So biology is a major that is offered at lots of different schools. But if you know that you're interested in biology, you might be interested in some majors that are even more specific than that. Things like neuroscience or genetics, biochemistry, microbiology, plant biology. These are all specialties within the biological sciences field and help prepare you for more specific careers, but also may help prepare you for master's degrees or PhD programs, advanced study inside these areas. Physiology and health and disease is one of our really interesting undergraduate biology focuses here at DU. And it's been particularly interesting to see that major now, given the global pandemic or the pandemic that we just all are living through, because you're able to focus in both on biology, but also on how biology is applied to health and disease. It's really great for students who want to go on to work in the medical sciences. But it's also good for students who go on to work in any number of other areas like pharmaceuticals, who want to just continue in biology study, but focusing in on how it kind of applies to humans and disease. In most business schools, you start with a core business class first and then specialize after your first year anyway. But a business degree is something that people know. They know I want to major in business. But every business school may have different offerings that are specific to what their strengths are. Accounting, information analytics, finance, for example. At the University of Denver, we're very big on hospitality management and real estate, so we're pretty focused on that, but also programs in the ethics of business. So wanting to kind of explore not just how we make money, but also how we do it in an ethical way, and how we do that in an equitable way to keep everybody happy while also making sure that we're still making money as a business is set up to do. So these are some examples of kind of when you're thinking of business, maybe you go into more detail by looking at some of these majors beyond just a general business major. Engineering is another one that has a huge subset of majors. Engineering is a really tough major, so I know a lot of students are interested in it, but I want to make sure that if you are considering engineering, you know that you are going to spend a lot of your time doing math. So math is usually a pretty sizable portion of engineering, but it's actually most important when you're looking at engineering to be really good at problem solving. And so it is a good critical thinking major, even for students who may be only so-so in math. Engineering is not just doing the calculations, it's also figuring out the problems in order to know what calculations to do. Inside engineering, you could major in things like electrical or mechanical engineering, you could do aerospace, but you could also do things that are related to that, like astrophysics and astronomy. You could be majoring in biomedical or biomedical products with an engineering degree, or any number of these kind of subspecialties. Also, just make sure you note that this is a good example of where job titles and the things you study may not entirely match. There are plenty of people whose job titles may just say Chief Engineer 3. But the fact from that, you wouldn't know that they were a chemical engineer or they were doing biomedical products or doing computer science, like any number of these programs. The job title and the major may not entirely match. But if you're looking at engineering, there's so many ways for you to specialize within the field. I also want to make a note about pre-law and pre-med, which is something we get asked a lot about. In the USA, law and medical school actually come after a bachelor's degree. So you do not major in law or medicine during your undergraduate years. Although I do know there's a few schools now that offer an undergraduate degree that's in law studies or legal studies, but it still is set up for you to go on to law school, which is a master's level program. For law and pre-med, you actually can major in anything and then go on to law or medicine. What you do need to do, though, is make sure that the classes you take line up with the entry requirements for law or medicine. So medicine, that most often means that students major in things like biology or physiology, the chemistry courses that I kind of mentioned before in the biological sciences area. In law, that may be majoring in things like political science or sociology. But I really do mean what I say here, when you can major in anything. There are students who are undergraduate music majors and then go on to medical school. There are students who are undergraduate music majors and then go on to law school. So there's still a lot of options available to you for you to make a major and minor at the undergraduate level that set you up for these programs, but don't necessarily track 100%. It's also really important to emphasize here that medical school in the United States is very competitive, and most medical schools in the US actually don't admit international students. They're only set up for US citizens. So you have a little bit more of a limited option when it comes to medicine. And law school isn't always the best option if you're interested in practicing law in your home country. So you may instead choose to do a bachelor's in your home country and then come to the US for an LLM, which is like a one-year master's degree in law that comes after your bachelor's. Many different options connected to pre-law and pre-med. So obviously happy to talk through that more, but also make sure that you're talking to the advising services of both Education USA before you come to the US. But when you get to campus, talking to the advising services that we have that are specific to students who are considering applying to law at medical school. I also want to talk about how majors are not the only thing you need to be thinking about when you're looking at a university. You also want to make sure that you're exploring the internships, the volunteer opportunities, and leadership things that are happening on campus. So many of our students come and may do a major in some of these areas we've talked about, but then find that they learned so much and grew so much as a person from their internships that they got in the city of Denver. From that practical experience you're getting with the companies, with the organizations you're part of on campus, actually complement what you're learning in the classroom very well, and are a big part of getting that prepared for that first job you get after you graduate. You also need to be thinking about how your minor complements your major together. So they can be very related, but they can also be very different and allow you to kind of show your broad range of interests. For example, if you major in business and you minor in Spanish, it shows that you're really interested in different cultures and you're prepared to do business in many different places. If you major in engineering, you could easily minor in music, allowing you to continue to study something that you may be very passionate about. Also allows you to show on your resume that you have many diverse interests. Biology and computer science, for example, is another thing where you may be really interested in the biological sciences, but if you have an interest in computer science, putting that on your resume shows that you're able to use complicated computer systems to solve the biological questions that you're mostly focusing on. And so it makes you a much more well-rounded candidate when you're applying to your first jobs. And in my closing here, I want to make sure that I'm reminding you all to ask for advice. You can talk to your teachers, your admission counselors, your parents and friends. You can ask them specifically about what classes they think you should take, their careers and what they've studied in school, and ask them if they have careers that they think might sound interesting to explore, experiences that they encourage you to seek out when you get to university. But finally, remember that the major you choose, it's most important that it's the best for you. So going through the exercises that I started this presentation with, of evaluating what you love, what you can be paid for, what you are good at, and really making a choice that is motivated internally, not motivated by what your parents are telling you to major, will help you be more successful at university, but also help you be more successful in life and happier in the long run. So just remember that the major that you choose really needs to be whatever is best for you, first and foremost. With that, I really want to open it up to questions. So if people have questions, I'm happy to take them now.
Thank you so much for the wonderful presentation. It was very rich. So I really thank you for taking the time to present for Libyan students. And yeah, we received some questions on the Facebook page, and I'd like to remind the students who are in the Zoom to type their questions if they have any, or even just, you can unmute yourself and talk directly to the representative. So let's start with the first question that we received on the Facebook page. So Khalid is asking, is it okay if the subjects that I'm willing to study are not pretty much related? If yes, wouldn't it maybe affect on my academic performance?
So I'm getting from the question that they're asking, is it okay to take many different subjects like in the university?
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. So actually, so at the university you can mix and match very many different subjects, and in fact, at most universities, you're going to be required to take subjects in different areas anyway. It's part of the structure of U.S. undergraduate degrees, so it shouldn't impact your academic performance too much as long as you're meeting the requirements for your degree. In every degree in the US, what you get is essentially a list of the types of classes and classes to take over your 4 years. And there's within that list of classes, lots of them that will be kind of generic placeholders. They'll be like, you must take a natural science class, you must take a math class, you must take a creative class. But then we also have lists of what counts as a natural science class, and you get to choose which of those natural science classes you want to take. Some classes will be very set. So if you're doing an engineering degree, for example, you will have to take engineering 1 through 12 at the school, and they will be very fixed classes. First this class, then this class, then this class, then this class. But it's both very normal and really required to take lots of different subjects. So it shouldn't set you back academically as long as you are following the guides given to you by your academic advisors at the institution.
Wonderful. Yes. Now let's move on to the next question. So Asma is asking, how many classes are undergraduate students allowed to take?
So it varies depending on the academic system. Most students across the universities in the US are taking between 4 and 7 or 8 classes at a time. At the University of Denver, most of our students take somewhere between around 46 total classes while they're here at the university or more. We tend to measure things in universities not by number of classes, but by number of credit hours. It's another just concept in the US that you will learn. You don't need to know it right now. You can learn that when you get to university, but essentially each class will have a value, a number of credit hours, which is supposed to indicate the amount of time you're spending on the class. And a typical degree here at DU is 180 quarter hours because of the way that we divide our academic year. But at other institutions, you may have like a semester school, you may have like 120 semester hours you have to complete for the degree, which generally translates to a similar number of classes over the course of the degree.
All right, that's great, yeah. Now we have a very good question. So a student is asking, would all the credits that I previously took for a particular major be wasted? And would I need to start from scratch if I switch to another major?
That's a great question. So no, in most cases. So it really depends on what you're switching between. It also depends somewhat on the university. At a school like mine, it's very easy for you to move between different majors that are kind of in the same area within the first couple of years. So if you've spent 2 years studying psychology and then decide you actually are going to switch to biology, you don't have to start over. If those 2 years still count, you'll still probably be able to graduate in another 2 years. If you started off though as a music major, you're taking a lot of very music specific classes. And then if you, after 2 years, decided I want to be an engineering student, well, then you haven't taken 2 years of engineering classes that are required for the degree. So at that point, you are going to probably need more than just 2 more years to graduate. Sometimes it really depends on when you are talking about switching your major and how closely related those classes are. But sometimes, depending on the subject, you can make really bold shifts even after 2 years of study. If you started off as a creative writing major, and then after 2 years decide that you want to switch to gender studies, those seem very different, but because the degree requirements are not that different in between the two, all of the stuff on, I don't know if I can actually go back to my little pie chart. All the stuff on the left of this chart, the electives, the minor, the general education, will still apply. It's just the major classes that need to change for some of these majors that have requirements that are more closely aligned. So for the most part, you can switch majors within that first year, even 2 years, and not be losing it. You don't have to restart. It just becomes a little more complicated if you're changing this major after the 3rd year, or changing between things that are very rigid, kind of like engineering, some business programs, music, etc.
Yeah, thank you so much for elaborating. Yeah, I'm going to go back to the ones that are received on the Facebook. If a student got a bachelor's degree in computer science, and then does that student need to demonstrate any kind of work experience if he or she is planning to apply for a master's degree? I paraphrase your question, Basma.
Yeah, that depends on the master's degree. So some master's degrees, if you do a bachelor's degree in computer science and then you go straight into a master's, they do look for some kind of work experience before admitting students, but oftentimes they don't. They're just looking at the classes that you took during your undergraduate to make sure that those were you did well in them and they prepared you for the master's level curriculum. So for computer science, it is not atypical for someone to go straight from undergrad through master's and then graduate and go into the workforce after.
Wonderful. Also, could you please share your contact details? It could be if you have one slide, or just you can type them here, because one of the students is interested in, getting more details about University of Denver and connecting with you. And let me go back to Facebook. Oh yeah, so another question says, what are the requirements, the academic requirements for double majors?
Yeah, that depends on the majors, and it's also university specific. So it's often pretty easy to double major in things that are connected. So if you did biology and psychology, you could double major in that. If you wanted to double major in literary studies and creative writing, you could do that. It is sometimes harder for double majoring in things that are spread across very different disciplines or divisions of the institution. So at the University of Denver, double majoring inside our College of Arts, Humanities, and Social Sciences is quite possible because the degree requirements are similar. If you're trying to double major, though, in music and engineering, and those are always my examples of just very specific, detailed requirements, that is much harder to double major within 4 years. It will just take you a longer time to do it. But for most majors, you can do a double major or a major and minor within 4 years quite simply. I also always talk to students, you have to really think about why you want to double major, because sometimes you may be able to study the same types of things and take the same level of classes doing a major and a minor and just going above and beyond the requirements for the minor.
Awesome. Okay. So Mubashir wants to know, when should students decide to take a minor?
Right. Minors are a little bit different than majors. So majors, typically you talk to your advisor and may declare a major before you have actually taken the classes inside the major. Minors are often something that a student takes a class or two in and then decides if they're going to minor in it, unless that minor requires some kind of special application, which sometimes they do. So when you get to the university, you might choose to apply to a minor. I keep using music today. That's not intentional, but for example, a minor in music, you might have to audition in order to become a music minor. But for other things, you might take, you just take a class in it, then you take another class in it. And then once you've taken your 6, 7 classes in the subject, you can declare it as your minor. It depends kind of on the university's process for that, but that's kind of how it works. Usually students don't choose their minor though, and really choose their minor until you kind of get to the university. You don't need to have decided that before you apply. You may shop for a university, knowing that you're interested in the subject, but the major is something that is included in the application. A minor usually isn't binding in the application.
Great, yeah. So one last question from the Facebook. So a student wants to know if it's possible to minor in foreign affairs or political science.
That also depends on the institution. So some schools, yes. Many will not. We at the University of Denver, you can minor in political science. So that's something that would be possible, but it really depends on the school. I'll also note though that many schools, if you can't minor in it though, you might still be able to kind of create a sort of a minor by taking the electives in that subject. So if you take enough electives in the subject, you'll still take all the classes. You just may not have a designation on your transcript that says minored in this. So for example, actually in my undergrad, I started off as a French minor. I was going to actually minor in French. I did not. I ended up dropping the last classes I needed to complete the minor because I was taking other stuff, but I still took all of those classes. I still got to study lots of languages. I just didn't end up actually getting an actual minor in French.
Great. So I don't think that we have any other questions. So for anyone who's watching, if you have any specific questions about University of Denver, or if you'd like to get in touch more with our representative today, make sure to send him an email, and I will share your email on our Facebook page as well. And yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for coming today and for taking the time to present and to answer the questions of our students. And I'd like to thank everyone also for watching. And just a reminder, so our next Facebook Live session is going to be on April 14th, and the topic is going to be on applying for scholarships and internships in the United States. So if you'd like to explore different financial aid opportunities that are available in the US, like internships, scholarships, on-campus jobs, etc., make sure to come and join us. Again, thank you so much, Jacob.
Right. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. I noticed that I did see a few people asking just for more information on the University of Denver. Do just make sure you check out our website. There's lots of ways for you to get more information specific to DU, including virtual visits and things like that. So really appreciate it. And let me know if you have any questions.
Sure. Thank you. Have a good day. Bye-bye.
Bye.